All right. Picture this. It's Friday night, which it is. You're done with work for the week, and you probably are. You've clocked out, you've slammed your laptop shut, and you're about to board a flight to go see your girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever. You're already dreaming about that in-flight beverage. You are thinking about that in-flight beverage. And then suddenly, you get summoned back to the office, and you're a little panicked. I mean, just imagine what that would feel like. And as I tell you what happened to FBI Director Kash Patel tonight, because that's basically a version of what happened to him tonight. Because tonight, MS Now is reporting that top Trump administration officials have been, quote, frustrated with Patel and summoned him to the White House, forcing him to abruptly cancel his weekend getaway plans to see his girlfriend in Chicago, who is apparently performing at a country music festival in the parking lot of the stadium where the Chicago Bulls play, which good for her, I guess. She's had a string of performances as of late. Now, one of the sources briefed on the trip said Patel canceled the trip while on the tarmac and was summoned to the White House immediately, adding that it was apparent panic. Now, the precise reasons that Patel's political bosses demanded he cancel his trip and report to the West Wing are unclear, but several people said top Trump deputies were disturbed by a range of actions by Patel. Some found it confounding that the FBI director was leaving town amid the recent revival of the war with Iran and alleged threats against the president's life, according to a person familiar. Others cited two unforced errors by Patel that created bad optics for the Trump administration. They certainly did. I mean, the first being his early morning tweet in which he boasted, this is a quote, you can see it on your screen, "My jet ski is gold-plated, dumbass." His words, not mine. Which he wrote in response, by the way, to MS Now's coverage of his high-flying lifestyle. Stay classy as always, Kash. Now, the second misstep, the people said, was that extensive reports by MS Now and other news outlets about taxpayers footing the bill for Patel's globe-trotting ultimately spurred formal questions from Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, a critical ally, of course, of President Trump. He's old, but he got kind of wily this week. Now, so far, the FBI has declined to comment. A White House official denied Patel was summoned, saying he was just there for unrelated meetings on a Friday night after he canceled his trip, sure. And White House spokesperson Stephen Chung told MS Now that Director Patel remains a critical player on the administration's law and order team. And listen, I have written a lot of statements in my time. Let me just pause on that very specifically worded Stephen Chung statement for a moment. Because remaining, quote, a critical player on the administration's law and order team is not the same as saying Kash Patel is an excellent FBI director. The president relies on him, and he's looking forward to working with him in that role for the remainder of the administration. It's not. We don't know more than that, but I'm just saying. So we will be keeping a close eye on that story for sure. But guess what? Kash Patel isn't the only Trump official who is living the high life. Certainly not. I mean, listen to what J.D. Vance had to say on a podcast recently about how his life has drastically changed since becoming vice president.
Like, my life is, dude, totally transformed. I don't go to the grocery store anymore. People go to the grocery store for me. Most of my meals, like when I cook a meal, it's like, I love to cook, actually. I'm a big baker. I like to cook for my kids as a special occasion, but I don't have to cook anymore because I've got an army of people who are willing to like cook me my food. My life is so weird. I fly around on a 757, no more TSA lines for me and the kids. It's so weird, but it can become the sort of thing that if you internalize it, you start to be an entitled asshole.
You don't say. I did learn that J.D. Vance considers himself a good baker, so I guess there's that bit of information. But the irony here is that the point Vance was attempting in that clip was that he is actively trying to avoid becoming an entitled you-know-what. However, projecting a pious attempt at humility is hard, especially when sources tell Axios that Vance is simultaneously eyeing a house to lease on a grand 500-acre farm in Middleburg, Virginia, a property that last sold for $8.5 million. Here's how Axios puts it. Between vineyards and equestrian estates, it's a slice of countryside far removed from the hard-scrabble upbringing Vance describes in his book, Hillbilly Elegy. Certainly is. Look, I'm not saying that public officials do not deserve hard-earned vacations, but it is pretty rich that Vance appears to be saying one thing and doing another here. Promise to remain humble while also bragging about your tax-funded chefs and staff, and then dreaming about kicking your feet up inside a multi-million-dollar mansion. Those two things don't really go together. Meanwhile, Americans all across this country are struggling to pay rent, let alone buy a home. It may come as no surprise to you that yesterday home prices in the United States hit an all-time high. And LendingTree says that fewer than 4 in 10 non-homeowner households can afford a typical starter home priced around $200,000. The American dream of owning a home is increasingly out of reach, so much so that many are rethinking it altogether. Then there's the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who also seems increasingly out of touch, if that is even possible. He started out of touch. But according to CBS, Hegseth is concerned that some service members have facial hair. And he has expressed frustration over lapses in physical training and violations of military height and war standards. Hey, Pete, isn't there a war you should be thinking about? You know, instead of facial hair, maybe? You know, the one with Iran that Trump said was over but then restarted this week? Seems like a bigger concern to me. The war that has sent gas prices skyrocketing, causing other essentials like food to go up with it. Speaking of groceries, you may be shocked to know that it isn't just members of the Trump administration who are increasingly out of touch. There are also Republican lawmakers, like Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, who is currently running to be Iowa's next senator, and thought it would be a great idea to just try to relate to the average Joe, to tell them she knows what families are facing.
I am at the heart of everything, a working mom, and whether it is, you know, refueling the minivan or restocking my fridge for our teenager boys, I know what is facing our families here in Iowa.
You know, I'm getting the text from my kids on the way on the plane out to D.C. Mom, can you put some more money in my lunch account? Or, hey, can you do something about the lack of groceries in the house? That's an everyday problem in our house right now.
Now, I do not know the inner workings of Ashley Hinson's household, but what I do know is that the folks at Midas Touch point out that according to her recent financial disclosures, Hinson's net worth has increased by up to $7 million while she has been in office, thanks to her husband's ownership of individual stock in his private company. And I will just go out on a limb here and say the average American has nowhere near those financial assets, and certainly not the average person sitting in Iowa she's trying to get to vote for her. And unlike Ashley Hinson, they're actually struggling. According to a new survey this week, 67% of Americans say meat and poultry are especially unaffordable these days. 82% believe that politicians have the power to lower costs if they choose to do so. Also this week, an Economist YouGov poll shows that 88% of Americans say the price of their food has gone up. 87% say the price of their gas has risen. And 77% of Americans say their housing costs have gotten more expensive. Just sit with that for a second. The overwhelming majority of people in this country say the cost of basic things like food, gas, housing have gone up in the last year, because a lot of them have. And in the face of all of that data, what did Donald Trump do with a bipartisan housing bill that has been sitting on his desk? Well, today he posted online, "I will not sign the housing bill in protest over the fact that the United States Senate is not capable of passing the Save America Act." His voter suppression bill, of course. So the bad news here is that the people in charge of the federal government right now are comically out of touch with the country they're supposed to be running. The good news is there's an election coming. And in politics, it is incredibly useful when your opponents have a huge problem on their hands and don't even seem to be tracking that it is happening.